Before we go too far into the idea of forms, I mean, part of the fun of Socrates is we can actually discuss Socrates. He has a very interesting life. But one of the things that's most important is Socrates was put to death by the city of Athens. And so one of the things we can start off with is the idea that his trial. Basically, he was brought up on trial for crimes against the city or crimes against the state. And he was charged by some people who weren't very happy. Socrates was known for going around and questioning society. He'd stand out in the city square, the agora, and he'd talk to people. He'd ask questions. He'd say, well, why do you believe that? And why do you think this is right? And don't you think it should be this way? And he had a tendency to make people mad. And so what happens is Socrates gets known as being a little bit of a rebel rouser, a person who's looking to point out flaws and errors and problems, and so he gets a bit of a reputation for not being well liked. He's making things difficult for those in power, and so he gets brought up on charges, 2 charges. The charges are corrupting the youth and atheism. And so he basically goes in and they present the case, that he's corrupted the youth. And one of the things is that the idea here is that one of the big groups of people who do philosophy, who did what Socrates would do, is they would get paid by people to teach them, but they were essentially what they would call sophists. And sophist comes from the Greek word for Sophia, for wisdom, and they were called wise ones. And they would go around and they were basically like lawyers. They would, if you paid them enough money, they would argue your point. And that's the way lawyers are. I mean, if you go in and you say, I'm being tried for a crime, defend me, they'll do it if you give them the right amount of money, if you pay their fees. And so, they aren't interested in the truth, they're interested in winning their argument. And so that was part of what he was associated with. But Socrates, on the other hand, is like, no, I've never been interested in winning. I'm just interested in arguing. I don't try to claim to know anything. I don't claim to know it. He claims the only thing he knows is that he knows nothing, and that he's not trying to argue for any position. He's just out there discussing, trying to find what he can know, what can't be known. And so, that's basically where that comes from, is sort of an association with the sophists. He was not a sophist by any account because he never really took positions, and he really never, he only really discussed ideas and let other people reach conclusions, as far as the way he's portrayed in the writing of Plato. Now, one of the things, I'm trying to think of what I want to say. Oh, one of the things, though, about this is that, about the Socrates or Plato of the early Greeks, that we can do is they say he corrupted the youth. Well, Plato is on trial, and basically there's a huge jury, and they're out there, and they get to decide whether or not he's done these crimes. And it's a group of actually 500 jurors that vote, and the majority rules. And so he's there, and he says, well, I'm here to defending myself. And he says, the people who, if I had really corrupted the youth, I mean, if you, as a younger person, maybe in this class, or maybe you have younger children or something, if somebody was corrupting your children, who would be the first person to want the blood of the person who is corrupting them? Your parents, right? Or you as the parent. If somebody was being a bad influence, you would be the angriest. And what he's saying is the families of these people aren't angry at all. They're fine with me. We're cool. They're here sitting there in support of me. And so he's basically saying, you can't say I'm corrupting the youth, because the people who think I'm corrupting them would be the families, and they aren't against me. He said the other claim is, this atheism, that he doesn't believe in the Greek gods. And he basically says, I believe in the Greek gods. I follow the rules. I go on I believe in the Greek gods. I've upheld the state. I've been called upon by the gods. I may not always come to the same conclusions or espouse the traditional orthodoxy of Greek theology, but I do believe in the gods. I believe I've been called by the gods, and I will do what the gods have called me to do. And so those are his basic responses. The jury goes out. They come back with a verdict, and I can never remember the exact verdict, and I don't know if anybody really knows. But the idea is the verdict comes back like 260 to 240, slightly in favor of guilty. So he's found guilty of the crime of corrupting the youth and atheism, even though he's put forward a fairly decent argument against it.